So how do you engage a disengaged employee? Now, of course, you don't want to get to the point where they become disengaged, but odds are if you are in any sort of workplace, you have someone on your team who is disengaged. In fact, Gallup found that about 50% of employees nationwide are somewhat disengaged. About a third are actively engaged, and 20% are actively disengaged. That means that they're actively working against the productivity of your entire team. So engaging folks before they get engaged is important, but there are activities, strategies, and tactics that you can use to make sure that even those folks who are teetering on disengagement can come back and be excited, engaged, and bought into the mission of your organization. So there are 3 big steps that I'm going to share with you today of how you can engage someone who's disengaged. The first is you have to identify what disengaged looks like. It's more than just showing up late or gossiping. Really, at its core, a disengaged employee is someone who's not using their creative efforts to improve their job performance. That means they're going through the motions, they're reacting rather than taking a proactive approach. They don't seem to come up with new ways of doing things. Now, many inside of corporations of all sizes don't think that this idea of engagement is important. They say, well, they just need to do their jobs, or they just need to take orders or do the process or do things how we always do them, without realizing that if you're not actively causing those who work for you to engage their brain, to engage their problem-solving skills, their personal leadership skills, they're going to become disengaged over time. So you need to identify what disengagement looks like for you. That's first and foremost, is realize it's not just the active disengagement, which may be falling asleep at work or checking social media constantly. Oftentimes it's that slow kind of, maybe I won't bring this up with my boss, or maybe this isn't something that's going to really, take root. Maybe I shouldn't give this as a suggestion. Those are the really dangerous routes that lead to actively disengaged employees. So make sure that your managers at all levels are trained to recognize what early signs of disengagement looks like. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is to have a conversation with that individual. If they are fairly new and they're bringing some of this kind of level of disengagement, feelings of not really giving it their all at work, you have not as much time to kind of reflect on what their baseline is. Because their baseline is typically when they're coming in, they're excited, you know that they have the DNA to contribute, to think creatively, to put in the hours, to get the work done well, to reflect on the work, everything an all-star employee does. That's what you want an engaged employee to look like. So have conversations, whether they've been there for 2 years or 20 years, thinking back to what that baseline was. Have a conversation with them and ask them, how do they think that their experience has changed? Maybe their input, maybe their level of excitement, and let them be the one who answers whether or not they feel engaged, rather than coming at our employees and saying, you're not as engaged as I noticed before, what's wrong? That causes folks to get defensive and they feel like they can't really be honest about what's going on. So you want them to self-evaluate, to be able to analyze whether it's in written word, in an online survey, in a focus group, or in a one-on-one conversation. Put it on the individual to be able to reflect on what is an engaged and what does a disengaged employee look like, and then cause them to reflect on their own performance to measure whether or not they fit one of those 2 buckets. Step number 3, and I already mentioned it, is that you need to train managers and frankly employees at every level to recognize disengagement. You want to be in an environment with a 0 tolerance policy when it comes to disengaged employees. You don't want employees to phone it in, to not really care, to come early, leave late, and not really mind if their work product isn't really what it used to be. That comes with accountability. Now, accountability doesn't mean rules, it doesn't mean that they're going to get in trouble, but it means that they are part of a community that they don't want to let down. There are only so many rules, processes, and procedures that can keep folks in line. You must create a culture where I know I need to show up because I can't let my team down. Whether it's high stakes or whether it's just a Monday morning meeting, you want to make sure that folks feel personally connected and extremely loyal to their team first, as well as to their company. All the work that we do on turnover, retention, and understanding why folks stay really comes down to the fact that people are loyal to people and not companies. However, when they're asked why they leave, oftentimes they'll say it is the people that causes them to leave. It's not the company, it's not the brand, it's the people. So if you can train your people, whether they're employees, managers, supervisors, directors, heads of departments, for them to be trained to recognize what disengaged employees look like and give them the tools, the conversations, the solutions and strategies that they can then bring in with their team to recognize it's their responsibility to make sure every person on their team is not only pulling their weight, but loves working there, is giving their all, and is making that place a great place to work for everyone.